It is December 10th, 2024, and Israel is doing literally whatever it wants in Syria right now, including stealing even more land, destroying Syria's air defense capabilities, launching hundreds of strikes. Oh, and Israeli tanks have gotten within 25 kilometers of Damascus. Yet another reminder that the fall of Assad has only been good for the US, Israel, and company. We are going to be getting into all of the latest that is being reported here in today's video. But just a quick note that I have a new episode of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction, available now. Episode 13 is out, and in it, we are talking about what led up to the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria and how there are still countless questions remaining about what happened behind the scenes, right? What happened with Russia and Iran and, of course, Turkey, they're another big player here, and what it means for the country, where it leaves things as you have this new attempt at a transitional government, but you still have so many different factions competing for power in this one country. We discussed all of that in the latest episode of Sanction. If you want to check it out, as well as all of the other available episodes, you can do so now over on my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com, and on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. All right, let's get back to today's video. So Israel is having an absolute free-for-all in Syria right now, and it's wasting no time in doing so. I mean, it was literally on Saturday that you had the rebranded version of al-Qaeda sweeping across Syria. You had the Syrian Arab army standing down, not putting up a fight. Then it was early Sunday when you had the confirmation that Bashar al-Assad had left the country, had stepped down as the president or been removed, whatever way you look at it. And now you have Israel in a position where it's apparently trying to break every international law in the book, with reports noting that beginning late Sunday, Israel targeted around 100 sites in Syria, including military bases, air defense stations, intelligence headquarters, long and short range missile depots, weapons production centers, and unconventional weapons stockpiles. Israeli media then reported that early Tuesday, Israel launched around 300 strikes in Syria, mainly targeting army bases in the south and around the capital of Damascus, with an emphasis on air defense systems. Apparently, Israeli security sources are claiming that these strikes have significantly helped to expand the Israeli Air Force's operational freedom. Yeah, because that's what happens when you go after any possible way that Syria has to defend itself. And that seems to be the message here. Israel is clearly trying to prevent any sort of comeback that the Syrian Arab army could have to then come back and target Israel, because we know that this new rebranded version of al-Qaeda called HTS, that they're certainly not targeting Israel right now. In fact, their leader has said that they want to befriend Israel, as Israel is openly committing a genocide against the Palestinians. Which is yet another reminder that this so-called moderate, diversity-friendly version of al-Qaeda, however the West is currently trying to sell it, that their allegiance is not to the sovereignty of their own country, it's to the foreign powers who are currently helping them out right now. Oh, and if you ask Israel, they will insist that the strikes are, quote, limited and temporary, with Israel's ambassador to the UN telling the Security Council on Monday that, quote, Israel is not intervening in the ongoing conflict between Syrian armed groups. Our actions are solely focused on safeguarding our security. I swear, only Israel would carry out an all-out genocide targeting the Palestinians in Gaza and claim that they're just defending themselves, and then turn around and rain down hundreds of bombs on Syria and claim that they're not intervening in the conflict there. And by all accounts, the UN Security Council is buying it, because the only thing that we've heard from them following the emergency session on Syria on Monday is that they plan to come together to release a strongly worded statement to show just how unified they are. Got it. So nothing is going to change. There's going to be no accountability for Israel. I mean, what else is new? Speaking of what's not new, you've also got Israel using the complete lack of leadership in Syria right now, also notably the lack of foreign help for the Syrian people of any kind. Israel is using that chaos to continue on with the age-old tradition of stealing more and more Syrian land. Of course, Israel is claiming that they have to do this, that they have to expand the quote unquote buffer zone further into Syria as a way to help protect themselves. As if this rebranded version of Al Qaeda is coming after Israel, which, spoiler alert, they clearly are not. But if you look at the map, you see that Israel is going after territory that is about more than just Syria, because Israel has expanded its occupation to the highest point of Mount Hermon, which is the highest point in Syria. Not only does it give them a good point for targeting Damascus, which is around 50 kilometers away, but it's also on the border with Lebanon, with reports noting that it gives Israel more access to spying on and targeting Hezbollah. This, as Israel is actively working to cut off the supply lines running from Syria to Hezbollah and really any form of support that there could be for the resistance. Well, at least as much as Israel can get their hands on. And if that's not enough, you also have reports that Israeli tanks got within 25 kilometers of Damascus, and that Israeli ground troops overtly crossed the demilitarized border zone and invaded Syrian territory for the first time since 1973. And as usual, the international community is doing absolutely nothing about it. I mean, there's no talk of sanctions, of arms embargoes, of cutting off supply lines to Israel. No, they're just sitting back and watching as Israel openly steals more Syrian territory. But they are throwing in some strongly worded statements there, at least a few of them, such as Qatar, which is calling it a blatant attack on Syria's sovereignty and unity, as well as a flagrant violation of international law. And Saudi Arabia saying that Israel's latest attacks show its continued violation of the rules of international law and its determination to sabotage Syria's chances of restoring its security, stability, and territorial integrity. Okay, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, it's all fine and good for you to put out statements like that, but what are you actually doing about it, right? What are you actually doing to help the Syrian people to stop Israel's expansion? Nothing. You're doing absolutely nothing. And so the results of that, because Israel knows that it can get away with whatever it wants right now, they're putting statements out like this one, where they're openly claiming to have destroyed Syria's military fleet and saying that they will set up a sterile defensive zone in southern Syria. So the rest of the world is just kind of sitting back and watching this happen. Unless, of course, you're the United States and Turkey, in which case you're actively helping Israel to further destabilize Syria even more with strikes of their own, joining in on the free-for-all and claiming that they're just protecting their interest in the region. And if that's not bad enough, you have the US openly cheerleading Israel's latest violations of international law, because, what else are they going to do at this point? You've got good old State Department spokesman Matt Miller insisting that Israel is just defending itself and trying to prevent the impact of the power vacuum that they literally created. And speaking of power in Syria, there is a current attempt at a transitional government, and they have announced the new caretaker prime minister, who is opposition leader Mohammed al-Bashir, who has been leading the so-called Syrian Salvation Government in Idlib since January, and is a close ally of HTS leader Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. Which is so interesting, because you're telling me that for the last 4 years, this group, Al-Qaeda, was allowed to just, kind of chill out in Idlib, right? They were allowed to have their own stronghold there. It was openly known that it was an Al-Qaeda stronghold. There was a deal that was made between Russia and Turkey, clearly not to Syria's benefit here, made back in 2020. They're allowed to be there. Not only did this group plan out this whole offensive that they've carried out over the last 2 weeks, but they also had a whole shadow government that they were just waiting to implement. Interesting. I don't know what countries, looking at the US, know exactly how to do this, exactly how they approach these government overthrows, but it definitely sounds like something the US would have cooked up. And right on cue, you've got the mainstream media reporting here in the US that the Biden administration is considering lifting the terrorist designation they have on HTS and its leader because they're not Al Qaeda anymore. And that comes as we've started to see videos on social media showing gruesome attacks carried out by these so-called moderates who don't seem to be very diversity friendly, targeting the people of Syria. And if we've learned anything from the last several times that we've been through this, it's that they are just getting started when it comes to the violence targeting the civilian population. It's also important to keep in mind that any violence that is carried out towards civilians on the ground, while largely supported by Israel, oh, well, guess what? It's also going to be used by Israel to claim that they need to keep expanding their influence into Syria more and more in order to, say it with me, protect themselves. And all the while, it's these Syrian people who continue to pay the price, the Syrian civilians who have endured more than a decade of their country being targeted by the world around them. Right? You think of all of these different countries, from the US to Israel to Saudi Arabia to Turkey to Qatar, to all of these different countries that have done everything in their power to make the Syrian economy and the Syrian government collapse. And those are the people who have suffered through so much already, who are continuing to suffer right in front of our eyes. And the US and Israel and Turkey and others, the entire international community really, that's doing absolutely nothing. They are the ones who are continuing to further the suffering of the Syrian people. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also find Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.